Hey everybody, welcome back to the SITREP. Sorry, it's been a few weeks. We've been battling some real big sickness here in the house. Everybody is finally mostly back to normal, so we appreciate you joining us today. We have a few topics that we wanted to talk about, probably some things that you hadn't really heard of, but really should matter to you guys. So it is Sunday, February 15th, and if you haven't felt the shift today, today's headlines will fix that. We'll talk about fragility every week, but this week the fragility became concrete. We're seeing a convergence from state-sponsored arson in our digital networks, a military-grade dissection of a modern energy grid, and a total reconfiguration of the global supply chains that feed your livestock and stock your garden. So tonight, we aren't just reading the news, we're reading the tea leaves of the next 6 months. So lock the doors, check the perimeter, and let's get into the SITREP. All right, so topic number one is the digital arson alert. On February 10th, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC, moved the needle to severe. So this isn't just a normal data leak. They're responding to what they call a digital arson. Second. And so basically the news is here. Last Christmas, Poland. Let me get this video up here for you. Last Christmas, Poland's grid was hit by a massive coordinated attack. Now, the target of that, 30 wind and solar farms and a heat plant serving 500,000 people. So the attackers didn't just turn those things off. They used wiper malware to attack the whole system. Now, the deep dive about this topic here. Think about a wiper like a digital blowtorch. It doesn't just password protect your files for ransom, it deletes the firmware, the brain of the machinery. In Poland, they hit the what's called the RTUs, or remote terminal units. These are the small boxes at substations that talk to the main office. Now, by melting the firmware, the utility companies lost view and control. They were flying blind, basically, during a sub-zero cold snap. CISA just confirmed that the attackers got in through edge devices, things like your routers, your VPNs, and your internet-connected firewalls, just using default passwords, which, pause here, is so why yet another reason why it's so important to not use default passwords and to change them to really anything, but that, yeah. Anyway, sidebar back. So this is what we would call the Volt Typhoon playbook that we had kind of mentioned before briefly. They aren't trying to steal your credit card. They are pre-positioning, actually, to paralyze the water you drink and the heat in your house. So it's actually much worse than trying to steal your credit cards. So let's talk about the prepper takeaway here. The firmware gap. If a wiper attack hits your local water district, it's not a 24-hour fix. They should always go analog when possible, or at least have an analog option. If you have a smart home, ensure that you have physical backup. I know, at least for us, that's kind of not even a possibility because our well is so deep, but if it is high enough, then yes, please do that. So if the brain of the grid melts, all the computers are controlled, like what happened here in Poland, by Russia, then your dumb hardware becomes your most valuable asset. So your pumps, your hand pumps, all that kind of stuff. You also need to look at your home network. And like I mentioned before, we need to change default passwords on things like your Starlink router, your internet router, everything that's an internet connected device in your house. So we're talking Ring cameras, security systems, everything. Change those default passwords. The front door for these state actors is often a generic admin logon that you forgot about in the garage, and now they've worked their way into the entire system. And so I'll briefly talk about the article here. This is kind of what spurred on all of this. Let me hide. I don't know why it keeps coming on, but there we go. All right, so this article here is on Ground News, and I've talked to you about Ground News before if you've listened to the channel. They're an awesome website that will really consolidate a bunch of different articles and give you a good readout on things like bias distribution. You can see up here in the top right. It'll give you its sources and a bunch of different other stuff. And really, you know, the best thing that I really enjoy about Ground News is that it gives you this little summary here. And so it talks about what we just mentioned here, where it deployed that destructive wiper malware to target Poland's ground power system here. And so for a quick moment, we'll pause for a word for our sponsor, Ground News.
The news is divided. Ground News puts it back together, so you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. Compare headlines and read full articles to see which details are prioritized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other. Visit ground.news to learn more.
And if that's something that is interested to you, or you would like to at least give it a try, make sure to check out the link in the comments below for something that to get started. So the second thing we are going to talk about here is the islanding of Ukraine, is what I'd like to call it here. So let's look at the front lines. As of today, February 15th, the Ukrainian grid is being systematically islanded, is what we'll call it here. This week, the massive strikes hit 750 kilovolt and 330 kilovolt substations, which is the high voltage backbone to the power grid. Now, why does this matter to a homesteader in Idaho or California or a prepper, you know, somewhere else here in the US? And that's because this is the first time that we're seeing how a modern interconnected grid dies. It doesn't go dark all at once. It breaks into individual islands of parts of a power grid. Now, the deep dive here is the grid is like a circulatory system, kind of like blood in your heart, right? The 750 kV lines that were destroyed here in these videos you're seeing are the main arteries. And when you sever the arteries, the extremities, so the small towns, the villages, are forced into local generation. But here's the kicker. Without the backbone, the frequency of the electricity becomes unstable. And you might have power, but it's dirty power that fries your fridge or solar inverter. And I know a lot of people, I didn't understand this for a long time until we got into battery backup systems, which I highly recommend as well. But basically, whenever you have solar, especially at your house, you're in alternating current at 60 kilohertz. And it's super important for that to be very precise, right? And when it comes from the grid, it is very precise. It's a clean sine wave at 60 kilohertz, right? Because usually it comes from a rotating generator from coal or wind or water. Now, when you get solar involved in that, it's kind of jumpy and steppy as it goes up and down, and it tries to digitally reproduce that. Well, if you lose that backbone like we talked about, because they took out these main arteries to a power grid, you have no reference for that sine wave. And so when your fridge gets some, a 60 kilohertz signal, but it's shifted off or it's kind of jumpy and it's not what they expect, it can actually damage the equipment. It's not good and not healthy for it to be off like whatsoever. So that's why this is such a big deal here. So in Ukraine, right now, people are having to unload nuclear reactors because there's nowhere for the power to go. This is a terrifying level of technical sabotage. It creates a queue system kind of where regions are rotated through 4-hour windows of power, which, I mean, can you imagine only having 4 hours of power every day? That just blows my mind and would be absolutely crazy. So for homesteader strategies here, number one is energy independence. Something you really need to consider and think about and plan ahead. You can't rely on the grid as a single entity. You need to be your own energy island, like these towns and villages we just spoke about. If the town next to you is dark and you are the only ones with your lights on, then you also have a security problem. And I talked about this briefly in one of my other videos, where you may have the whole world set up, right? You may have battery backups and lights and your own water system and everything, and say everything else goes down, right? At night and you're shining and everybody can see you, that is a problem. So you need to practice good light discipline, good windows, like gout curtains, things like that, and make sure to, you watch which lights you actually have on. So, sorry. Side note, back to the topic at hand: frequency protection for the grid when you become that energy island. If it does become that, and your area, an energy, if your area does become an energy island, then yes, dirty power is coming. So you need to get super high quality surge protectors and power conditioners for your sensitive electronics. Better yet, you have a main breaker disconnect. Yes, I mean anyone in the US, I'm assuming that's worldwide, has these systems where you can just shut off power from the grid. And especially if you have a battery backup system yourself, that's why that is important, because you can just shut that off and now you all sorts of gotchas to that, but it is an option. So if you have that main breaker disconnect, which you should, plan so you can pull your house off entirely when things do get wonky, and you can usually save your equipment. Now, the other thing to think about is the neighbor node. In an islanded scenario, your GMRS radio or ham radios are the only things that will bridge the gap. In addition to a few other radios, things like Meshtastic, like we have and we've had videos on before, those are just amazing and are super helpful if you can work them. But if the local tower if the local tower is in a dark island, but you're in a light island, your cell phone is a paperweight, right? So cell phones are going to be useless more than likely anyways, so don't even count on them outside of the video that we had a few weeks ago where we talked about how they can be useful in terms of storing equipment and knowledge and resources. You really need to know which neighbors do have solar and which ones have medical needs before the islanding begins. And so that way you can know where to go if you need help. Because while we may be, call it energy storage experts, for example, maybe our neighbors are medical experts. Maybe he's a doctor in current life. So we need to know that so we can all work together to help each other through a situation. Hopefully that's actually a quick one and not an extremely long one. So yeah, that island is pretty crazy, and it's something that we just don't really think about, to be honest. It's truly unfortunate. So all right. Number 3, the tariff cliff. So let's talk about the March 1st shift. Now, this is about your food and your tools. So the news story here, as I have it on the screen, is the USDA just announced a $1 billion spending plan in emergency aid for specialty crops. So think of fruits, nuts, veggies, all that kind of stuff. Well, you may ask yourself, why? Well, it's because the supply chain is buckling under not necessarily tariff, but the tariff volatility, right? I'm kind of a fan of some of the tariffs, but it's the volatility of them that's causing issues in the supply chain. And the new global trade report says that 72% of pros see this as a #1 threat to business. So the deep dive here, what does this really mean? This isn't just about the price of bread, it's about the inputs. So most of our fertilizers, specific seed coatings, and tractor parts are caught in a massive trade tug of war. Mexico just slapped steep tariffs on non-FTA imports, basically aimed at China. And the US elective tariff rate is projected to hit 14% by the year end. So starting March 1st, we expect to see a step change in prices. We're moving from inflation to structural volatility. Companies are no longer trying to save money. They are just trying to find parts. If your tractor needs a specific hydraulic seal from overseas, well, that part might not be just that part might not be, I can't speak. So if you need a expensive tractor part, specific one from overseas, that part might not just be expensive, it might be unavailable for months as it sits in a bonded warehouse waiting for customs clearance. So the move here is #1. You need a 2-week window. You have roughly 14 days. You have a 2-week window. Sorry. You have roughly 14 days before the March price adjustments hit at the retail level. If you need 10-10-10 fertilizer or greenhouse plastic or specialized animal feed like medicated chick starter, I would buy it right now before you can't. #2 is the parts pantry. So look at your critical equipment, your generators, tillers, chainsaws, tractors, that kind of stuff. Buy the wear items now. So think of like air filters, spark plugs, fuel lines, belts, because in a trade war, it's that rubber belt that's $10 normally that puts a $2,000 generator out of commission. And #3 is seed security. So with specialty crops under pressure, expect seed prices for 2026 to skyrocket. If you haven't started your seed bank, this is your final warning. Focus on open pollinated varieties so that you can save your own seeds next year. Don't be that person buying a $10 packet of tomato seeds in May. I mean, it happens every year, and I see people, and I really try and help them. So lots of things coming in the future. Not really should be, if you watch this channel a bit, it should be no surprise, any of it really. A lot of it's all pretty expected of things to come, and we all need to be prepared for a lot of these worst case situations. The other thing I'll mention, I won't play it here today because the video, I'm trying to do dates and times for our normal videos, came out yesterday. And it was focused on large group gatherings and digital security when you're at a large group gathering, and some, what it's like, what happens, and some suggestions on how to help. Mostly I targeted at the Olympics because the Olympics is going on right now. And, I think people don't think about that. I think people just go to these large events and don't even think about their digital security and what they really should do. Because especially at the Olympics, there's a lot of people looking for data out there, and a lot of people trying to skim data and do a lot of different things, and they're getting it. So make sure to check out that video on our channel and see some things you can help, because it's not only about the Olympics, it's any sort of large gathering, any, protest, if you're going to that, any sort of concert, any sort of sports game, all of this stuff matters there and can be an issue. So please check out that video if you haven't already. So with no questions from the chat that I can see here, at least, I know that was a heavy SITREP, not as light as it has been before, but knowledge is always the first layer of armor. We're seeing that the digital arson, the energy island, and the tariff cliff all arriving at once. So don't be overwhelmed. Make sure to be prepared. And if you have any questions, comments, updates, additional things to any of this, please put them in the comments. I always will respond to you and get back to you as soon as I can, because we really need to work together as a community while we can to prepare for anything that might happen in the future. That is going to be huge, is working together to help educate each other, to help work together as a group to help improve each other's lives and the possibility of life in the future if something does hit the fan. And so with that being said, we will at some point in the future here, just working on getting it together and the logistics of it, have some sort of community where you can we can work on having discussions and helpful hints and tips and working together to do that. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, we truly appreciate it. Just a quick one today, working back on getting into the swing of things. We will have get back to our regular timing on Saturday mornings next week with some new updates on stories. Not sure what they are yet because I want to keep them as up to date as possible. So I'll usually pull the stories Thursday or Friday, write the script, and have them be ready for Saturday. So also make sure to check out our sponsor, Ground News. They're awesome. They're so helpful in finding a lot of these stories and getting background and info on a lot of this. So thank you guys so much. We truly appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys on the next one.